Harsha Silva, Minadi Dolahaga Kalek.
Mr. Chairman, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and its network of missions is Sri Lanka's public face on the international stage. Sadly, like all other institutions, the Foreign Ministry and the Foreign Service are today broken institutions that exist only by name, draining Sri Lanka's financial resources. The Minister of Foreign Affairs keeps touring the world, giving interviews about other countries, learning from Sri Lanka's failures, as if he had no role to play in the miserable state to which the country has fallen. Earlier today, State Minister Taraka Balasuriya said the Ministry of Foreign Affairs budget has been cut from $56 million in 2018 to $24 million for 2023. He lamented that was nowhere near money needed to run the ministry. To cut costs, like many of our colleagues had mentioned today, the embassy in Norway, which was worthy of kept being open, was closed. The consulate in Cyprus, which merits being kept open, was closed. But there are many consulates, including the one in Los Angeles, headed by Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa's brother-in-law, that should ideally be closed but kept open. Have all officials, the minister and Sri Lanka's ambassadors and high commissioners even started traveling on economic class to set an example to others? Senior US officials and ambassadors travel on economic class even when there is no economic crisis in their country. If the people are forced to pay massive taxes and expenditure on education and health is cut, then it is more than fair for economizing at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The State Minister said, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is like a boxer fighting with one hand tied behind his back. Said not enough staff. Or is it? Or is it that even Foreign Service officers have reduced themselves to a level of servility that have never been witnessed before? The concept of public service has been forgotten. Mediocrity and blind loyalty are rewarded. Professionalism is shunned. There's hardly any accountability from top to bottom. Officers do as they please, and the culture of impunity has taken deep root at the Foreign Service and the Ministry. Junior and mid-level officers have chosen the path of servility over professionalism, as they know that this is the route to securing foreign postings. It is appalling that the former Foreign Secretary, the Admiral, who is responsible for bringing disrepute to Sri Lanka on the international stage and contributing to the collapse of Sri Lanka's economy and breakdown of international partnerships, is being sent as Sri Lanka's envoy to Indonesia. The State Minister said the ministry was to recruit a fresh batch of Foreign Service officers, but the recruitment process needs deep scrutiny and amendments first. I hope that is happening, and also that the 40 positions he mentioned will be advertised and given wide publicity. We must attract the best. I want to speak a minute about the consular division. Does the ministry even bother about serving the public at all? When was the last time the ministry even personally visited the consular division? The consular division, which was elevated to a state-of-the-art division to serve the public, with wait time to obtain services being reduced to less than 10 minutes, Mr. Chairman, from an average of 5 hours, has been destroyed under the leadership of those who ran the ministry from November 19. The tales of woe and corruption that has been documented all over the recent past. How it takes the entire day, sometimes days, to get an appointment. How these appointments are quote-unquote sold at the entrance. What happened? I find it impossible to understand why you are unable to use the electronic document attestation service, EDAS, and its well-trained staff to provide a decent service to the public. In February 2017, we launched EDAS. In 2017, more than 500,000 documents were electronically authenticated, and the overall saved time for the public was approximately more than 2 million hours. This was a remarkable achievement in history of Sri Lankan e-governance. The next year, we won 4 awards. Among them were Public Sector Most Outstanding ICT Award, Gold Award in the Government and Public Sector category at the National Best Quality ICT Awards, Asia Pacific ICT Alliance Award for Best E-Governance Performance in Sri Lanka. Please fix this, Honorable Sir. It is a disgrace. If you want, I'll be happy to help. Mr. Chairman, the manner in which Sri Lanka handles human rights, naming and categorizing countries as friends and enemies based on voting in the Human Rights Council, is absurd. For how long are the politicians and officers at the Foreign Ministry and the key missions overseas going to fool the country with their infantile debating points without pausing to reflect carefully and work together with local communities and international partners to set things right and restore credibility in our institutions? Empty words and rhetoric about setting up Truth and Reconciliation Commission, like the State Minister mentioned this morning, for sure will not earn us respect of the international community or the respect of our own concerned and conflict-affected citizens, either when the rule of law and institutions already established, including the Office of Missing Persons, have been undermined and made into a mockery. I want to touch on the report of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights on the situation of human rights in Sri Lanka for a minute. The report reflected the prior reported concerns, but this time, Mr. Chairman, the Council specifically focused on the demand for accountability for economic crimes and echoed its recent peaceful, recent peaceful protests. This being the first time that the phenomenon of economic crimes has been reported, failure to take immediate action to address them would certainly lead to allegations of a new culture of impunity for economic crimes too. This would negatively impact on EU, GSP Plus, as well as assistance from IMF, creditors and investors. Since the government asserts that any international accountability mechanism on Sri Lanka would be contrary to the provisions of the Constitution, it would be the interest of Sri Lanka to begin to address economic crimes as alleged, using our own laws and domestic mechanisms that are independent and outcome-oriented. But instead, what is happening on the ground, Mr. Chairman? Those who committed these heinous economic crimes that tripled poverty in Sri Lanka, that made almost 10 million people, according to the University of Peradeniya, unable to survive without assistance, are being protected. It is inconceivable that the President has not even spoken about establishing a mechanism to investigate and act against those who committed these crimes. The investigation initiated by the COPE under the previous chairmanship of MP Herat was dismissed by the current chairman. I assume the position of the government on those alleged economic criminals was made clear by the President, who said during his budget speech that those who claim they would go after corrupt politicians are liars and not to believe them. Finally, on the dire need to restructure the massive foreign currency debt, the Minister of Foreign Affairs has a crucial role to play. The State Minister spoke about the ministry's involvement in picking Lazards and Clifford Chance to advise Sri Lanka. What have they done so far? What progress has been made with the private lenders? Today's Daily Mirror has two conflicting stories. One where the Governor Central Bank, Nandalal Veerasinghe, is saying that Sri Lanka will be able to get IMF board approval by January. And a second by Stanchart CEO Bingumal Tevaratantri saying perhaps by March, and I quote, when there is clarity on the haircuts that's going to be borne by foreign bondholders, bilateral creditors and domestic creditors. Whom does he refer to as domestic creditors? Local banks and individuals who invested in ISBs and SLDBs, or those who invested in LKR G6? There has to be clarity on this. There are so many conflicting stories on how well the restructure discussions are moving forward. The President said that Japan had agreed to lead the effort to set up an ad hoc platform for bilateral creditors in both Paris Club and China and India. Then they said, not so, but would help. What has happened? Who is talking to China? Without China's agreement on some form of restructuring, getting the IMF board approval would be almost impossible unless they agree on a Suriname model. But given the outcome of the experiment, I doubt very much that that option is, any longer an option. What I'm saying is, I don't think the Suriname example is possible. That option is possible in Sri Lanka. The President met the Chinese ambassador last week. What was the outcome? Was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the State Minister, Foreign Secretary, or anyone part of these diplomatic discussions? What is happening in Delhi? Is the High Commissioner speaking to the Indian side? Or is he running a separate operation completely outside of your ministry, Mr. Minister? Today's papers say the Minister of Foreign Affairs is going to DC tomorrow. Mr. Sabri is supposed to meet with Anthony Blinken to discuss debt restructure with the IMF. Will you, Mr. Minister, tell the Secretary of State that walking away from the MCC was a mistake?
Another 2 minutes.
Right, 1 minute, I'll stop. Will you seek assistance again from the United States? What assurances will you give that such treatment won't be meted out to them again? These meetings, Mr. Minister, have limited outcomes. What we need is our missions to integrate with the BOI, EDB and others to drive investment promotion on a methodical way. there are technically superior ways of achieving our investment objectives. Successful countries do these things. I would like to read a para from my speech on the Foreign Affairs vote on, for 21 in November 2020. I quote from the performance report of the Foreign Ministry, which is on our table, of expanding the existing trade, investment and labour markets whilst looking for new opportunities with Asian and African countries to cultivate economic ties to diversify export baskets. I wish him the very best in his endeavour. I'm speaking about Honourable Taraka Balasuriya. I encourage him to restart the 18-week online economic diplomacy program I started with the Center for International Development at the Kennedy School of Harvard University. That was a first for a university, first for the university, and a first for us. It was really successful, with 40+ senior diplomats participating in the rigorous course to sharpen their skills needed for successful economic diplomacy. Sir, I would like to table the agreement we signed in March 2017. That was 2 years ago. Was anything done, Mr. Minister? Did you or your office even contact these people? I don't know. But what I do know is, with my discussions with them, I'm finishing in 45 seconds, is that what we started is being utilized by other countries and beating us at the game. We are falling behind. It is a sad state of affairs all around. In conclusion, to achieve meaningful and sustainable progress that will benefit all our people and take Sri Lanka on a real growth path, Sri Lanka must embrace and embody good governance, democracy, rule of law, security sector reform, human rights, public sector reform, economic reform, and commit to reconciliation and equal citizenship. Unless there is change on the ground, the network of missions overseas can do little except waste away Sri Lanka's precious foreign exchange. I was critical, but I want to wish the minister, the state minister, all the luck, because they need everything that they can gather. And if there is anything we can do, we are criticizing, but we want to be helpful at the same time. I wish the new secretary also and the entire staff all the very best in meeting its objectives for the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member.